First, the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Then I need a motion to approve or amend the agenda. So moved. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Seconded, all in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. All in favor. Approval of the minutes from October 17th, 2024. The minutes have been attached, and I hope everybody's had time to review them. It's fairly brief. There's no changes or adjustments.
Move to approve.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Louis is second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, nay. So all in favor. Updates from the Board of Adjustments. Jordan?
We had one petition today for septic variance in Hillsdale Township, and that was approved.
Okay, Marcia, anything with the county commissioners?
No, there were no conditional use permits before the last meeting.
Thank you. That brings us to our petitions. Our first petition is docket number PC 11-21-24-01. It is to consider a petition of Lance and Christine Klessig, who are seeking a conditional use interim use permit regarding the following: to allow the agriculture-oriented business, agritourism, pursuit to the Winona County zoning ordinance section 10.4.6-2 and 10.4.6-28.7.
Good evening.
That, Olivia.
Jump right into it. So a site overview, it's in New Hartford Township. You can see the overview map there. It's two separate parcels, but it equals about 40 acres. On County Road 125, Section 7, just south of 90 there. So this is the petitioner created site plan. On the left, you can see some of the buildings with the proposed pole shed, so that hasn't been built yet, and the greenhouse has. And then on the right, that's a little bit larger blown up. You can see some of the different buildings and how they're used. The three that are shown in like the yellow tan are the on-farms rental lodging accommodations. So some pictures of the rentals. This first one is looking at the lodge. The second one would be the cottage. And then the third one would be the bungalow. These are some of the other buildings that are used on the farm. So the greenhouse and then the outdoor arena area for the equine therapy. So some of the considerations of the project, it is ARC zoning. It's a family farm. They operate Heart and Soil Ridge and then Healing Rains. They offer on-farm stays, farm tours, workshops, equine therapy. There are 3 short-term rentals. Those are the pictures that I showed you of the structures. In addition to the family home, they live on site with their children. The rental structures were previously approved through CUPs as part-time farm help or home health care. So part of this request would be relinquishing those CUPs that have been approved previously. And that's condition 4, I believe, in the request. This property has been operating in a similar manner. When the petitioners bought it, the previous owners did have a similar operation. So this isn't a new proposal. Really, it's acknowledging what's there and permitting it appropriately. And they would not have any outside employees or signage, nor do they currently. They did attend a New Hartford Township meeting on October 10th. The township indicated no comments towards the request. And then our recommendation would be that you consider all materials and testimony before making findings that support your decision. We did draft findings that would support granting the CUP, and there are 4 conditions for your consideration. With that, I can take any questions. The petitioners are here as well if you have any questions for them. Eugene?
I can ask them.
Okay.
Anybody for Olivia? Thank you.
Thank you.
With the owners, care to tell us what you're up to? State your name and address. I know who we are, but.
Sure. Christine Klessig, and address, you said? 29224 County Road 125.
And I'm Lance Klessig, same address, I hope.
Thank you. Is there anything you want to tell us or that we haven't seen that's in your packet?
No, I guess other than saying we, this operation, I think it brings in interest into the farming community. And there's a lot of people out there that really are not connected to farms anymore, living in urban environments. We found that a lot of children, there's a need for that, for kids to have a like on-scene connection with the farm. And so that's sort of our vision, is to promote farming, promote agriculture, and wise use of land.
Gene, you had a question.
How long have you owned this property and who was the previous owner, if I may ask?
Sure. So we bought the property March of 2020. So the week of COVID, we signed the papers, and Dave and Sheila Heggie were previous owners to it. So.
And you've been operating it the same as they were since 2020?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we took most of 2020 to update the, just do some cosmetic work on the buildings and whatnot. But yeah, the structures were all there prior to us, buying it. So.
Mhm.
How many people do you, how many people do you rent to, or how many people stay there, or what's the turnover?
Yeah, well, they've been very well received, really popular. So we do have a pretty frequent, people coming in and coming out. Usually people stay for 2 to 3 days. They're pretty quiet. It's often families that are interested in coming. And so, yeah, I don't have like a specific number.
There's no long-term, there's nothing generally, nobody over
Oh.
5 days.
No, we actually don't prefer that. So we prefer the 3-day stays or so. So, yeah.
Yeah, and I would say the capacity wise, the lodge sleeps like 9 to 10 comfortably, and the cottage is like 4, and the bungalow is 2. So those are that's what we advertise as. So.
And we do have policies about, we don't do, we have quiet hours so that it's not, interrupting any neighbors, and we don't allow drinking outside and things. So it's usually pretty calm people that come, so.
I understand the equine therapy aspect, and there's also, obviously a greenhouse there. What are the other agricultural activities you've done or are planning to do?
Yeah, well, do you want to answer that, or do you want me to?
So we've tried a lot of different, since we've been there for 4 years, a lot of different enterprises. So we've done 2 years, we did 250 broilers each year on pasture, moving them around. The one summer we did 200 some laying hens. So we did a egg delivery drop route throughout La Crosse and up into Winona. We've raised pastured pigs for 4 out of the last 5 years. And then we also had a Red Angus herd and we were doing grass-fed beef and going to the different farmers markets with the pork, the beef. The greenhouse was built for flower farming. Chrissy was doing that for a couple of years. And so it's kind of been an evolution of trying different, we've done bee production, honey production with bees. So we had 25 hives last year on the farm. So kind of a variety of different things. Yeah.
Okay.
And then we're doing tours, community, kids from different schools are coming out and, we're walking them around and kind of helping them understand what farming can be like. So,
Okay, thank you.
yeah.
Any other questions? Go ahead. Marcia.
Yes, and just for full disclosure, I can probably see their house from my house, maybe on some days, so we live relatively close.
Yeah.
I'm not against this thing, but I'm trying to figure out as a commission and as planning staff, so we're relinquishing a couple conditional use permits, and again, we always got hung up on extra living facilities on farmsteads had to be farm help, and it usually was a trailer house and a kid moved in to help, mom and dad keep the farm going. So I'm just trying to figure out this type of enterprise, how it fits in our current, zoning and regulations and rules. And I apologize. The staff said they're relinquishing two different previous conditional use permits, but I didn't see them in here. I'm looking to staff. Were they highlighted in there?
They're in conditions.
They're in the conditions, but did we see the actual conditional use permits? Well, they were for, let's see, you had something in there. I did read it was a real brief.
Cabin for family members, one was permitted as conditional.
What page are you on, Lynn?
Page 8 of the packet, conditional use permit for part-time farm help in 1977. And one was for home health care in 2001.
Yeah, I remember.
Under site characteristics overview.
Well, it's just, I'm looking at page 40 under the conditions. Yeah, petitioner voluntarily agreed to revoke conditional use permits 119 and 971. So I'm looking at Olivia, what was 119 for?
On the second page after your agenda.
Yeah.
8 of the packet, site characteristics.
Copies of the actual permits themselves were not in the packet. They were described in the staff report on page 8, like Lynn was describing.
I'm sorry,
Just page 2, right after your agenda. There's 2 page numbers.
I had to search for it too. So that's
Right there under site characteristics. Just above your
okay,
thumb.
site characters. Okay, I'm sorry. Thank you.
Yep.
Okay, so one was for part-time farm help and one was for home health care.
Right. So 971 was home health care, and that one was issued in 2001. Yep. And then,
Not to,
correct.
that was the previous owner.
Both of them were. Yep.
And then 119 was for farm help. Now, were those two, were they tied to specific structures on the farm, or it was just very general?
Yes. Yep.
Very general?
Specific structures. Yep.
Okay.
Can you show us a picture of the buildings and explain which was which?
I mean, we're kind of going down a different path, which I don't have a problem with, but I'm trying to figure out, and I've always been, we have a lot of rules, we need to apply them equally. And if we need to change the rules, that's fine, but,
I believe the permit 971 was for the cottage. Is that correct?
Which one would it be?
It was,
Healthcare or?
yep, the home health care.
Well,
Yes, I think.
Yeah,
that
we
was-
actually weren't aware, we had been told by the previous owners that there was some CUPs, but we never, when Olivia came, it was the first time we had actually, she sent them to us via email, so
Sure.
we weren't aware of the specifics when we purchased the property,
But
so.
that would, the narrative that was given me, that would make sense, but it was the cottage, so.
and nobody was living there at the time? There,
No, they were being operated as vacation rentals when we purchased it.
well, that's what I kind of, didn't ever ask too many questions what was going on there with the previous owners, but it seemed to be a little,
Right, so
different.
we're trying to bring
in
things,
compliant,
yes.
and I greatly appreciate that. Right. Okay.
And just to correct things, we're not changing rules.
No,
We're adjusting to current usage
right.
and the old permits they no longer wish to have.
Correct. I
But
agree
the
with
two
that.
they're applying for is what they need now.
Right.
So that's not a change in rules. They're deleting one by their choice, 2 of them, and they're asking us for what I outlined earlier to operate this, and it's 10.4.6, section 2, and 10.4.6, section 27. which they do not have at this time.
Right.
And because they were permanently on there, they wish to have that removed from their deed.
Right.
Permit number 119 and 971. Do I have that correct, staff?
It reads correct.
Gene?
Now, that means that there is no problem with having these three structures for tourism under the present ordinance in this
Well, what they want to
application?
do is why they're here applying, so they need to get that to continue
Okay, but
this.
there's, you don't have to have reasons for ag tourism specific like you did for farm help or anybody else in the county for farm help or
As long
home
as it's
health.
short term, again, staff, is that understood or am I incorrect?
Right. If I can just add a couple.
One is year round and the other is short term.
Gene's question, if you look at the findings in the section that this is advertised under, it's under ag-oriented business and I believe a home occupation because they do live on the premise. And I think this cuts at an issue that goes back. We've had now several of these variety of applications where there is a need and there is a market out there to rent additional structures out on a short-term basis. I don't know how many of you have gone to these short-term rentals, sites like Verba or Airbnb, or I know there's a number of them out there, but I know what research we've done. I think you'd be shocked or amazed just how many properties are being rented on a nightly basis. Most of them are the single-family residential dwelling. That means it's a house that sits on a separate parcel. But there is instances where there might be additional accommodations and structures and camping. We've had a couple like this in Whitewater Township, and we've had one just down the road, I think, with the Frickson Farm. They had one of these that was very similar about a year or two ago. Where we've historically had issues is that throughout time, we've allowed a conditional use permit process to bring additional mobile home in or a trailer for part-time farm help or for full-time farm help or for the family member. And then we got caught in the debate about the granny pods and extended family. And now in the last 10 years, we've seen a lot of variation on the accessory dwelling units. And we've amended our ordinance to allow interim use permits. That means they could expire based on a specific event and time that could, have, so it's kind of opened its door to a different type of applications, but to address your the findings for ag tourism, staff has done a pretty good job in analyzing that according to the comprehensive plan and the zoning ordinance requirements.
Well, then my next question is, if they want to expand, is this conditional use permit application going to cover that, or do they have to come back, or?
If it's additional dwellings or units, it represents an expansion, they may have to amend this if it's a clear case of expansion. We're trying to deal with what is currently being requested to get a permit that would cover their interests in the structures that have already been established on that property. But yeah, say they came back in 5 years and wanted 2 more or 4 more or whatever, I think it would be appropriate that this board and the county board would revisit that.
So are the owners, the couple, are you in agreement or with that as stated?
I am, yes.
Yeah, we don't, so we don't have any plans to add any additional short-term rentals or structures for that.
Okay.
We feel pretty full the way we are. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
because we have 5 kids, so our farmhouse sits right up against the road, and so we're, we don't have any plans to add more rental units to, let's see, up on the upper left where we did, one of our proposals is to add a multi-purpose pull shed and indoor riding arena is what, that's what the building up there in the blue is for, but that's not residence or any sort of accommodations.
Yeah, I understand that. Now, And that's part of your plan as it was discussed as far as young people's education and training and stuff? Is
Oh,
that
yeah.
all with horses or?
Right now, primarily in the winter time right now, where it's not like the, the season where we would be raising pigs or chickens or anything. Right now, it is horses. So mostly it's horse experiences, getting kids acclimated to, understanding how to handle themselves around large animals. There's a lot of wellness, emotional health things that we can help families, children, adults even work through with horses.
Now, do you have the horses or would they have to bring their own horses?
We have the horses.
Okay.
Mhm.
Marcia?
I do have a question, one for Eric, and Eric, you and I been around a long time. One of the things, and nothing to do with your operation, but the previous home part-time farm help, I remember we made somebody take something down and remove it. That's why I'm kind of getting hung up a little bit. They had a trailer with some additional, and that ended, and we literally made them remove a structure. So that's, my history goes back. So I guess we didn't make them remove that structure when it got sold. There's a big concern around the neighborhood of, water and septics. So are all the properties serviced by one septic system, or do they have individual? And then is there one water source?
So there's one well, and there are two septics. The one for the house, we had to, in order to purchase the property, we had to put a brand new septic in. And the other one was existing and functioning. We pump it every year. So all the units, the two units go to that secondary septic, and then the one we built for the house actually ties in, it's hard to see, the bungalow, which is real close to it, so.
Okay, but those have been, so you built a new one when you moved into the house. So
Yeah,
that's
we
your
were-
primary residence, and
Yeah.
5 kids can take a lot of water. Okay,
Yes.
and stuff. Okay, so you're in compliance with those things.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Just on the topic of, you mentioned your animal units. I forget how many you said, a number. Do you have a registered feedlot?
There was a feedlot number or permit associated with when we bought the farm, and so those numbers, they're far below what the max were, but I don't know the number offhand, but yeah, we have a registered feedlot. I think it was prior to maybe when you were here, Olivia, but previous, we made sure we had it registered.
And have you performed water tests on site? Do you know that your water is fine for your guests staying, that there's no nitrate concerns that you'd have to disclose or
Yeah.
anything like that?
So our well is 642 feet, and prior to us buying it, we made that as a condition that we wanted it privately sampled. So we've had that, and I think we've had it sampled one other time since then. So, but
And
yeah,
you maintain regular testing of your water?
yeah,
Great. That's check. Great.
yeah. Good question.
Any other questions?
I got a health person sitting here. Do you, with renting these out for, they're short-term and anything, but I'm looking at my health person. Is there requirements from the Department of Health, licenses that you have to obtain or maintain? I don't know. I'm just asking, because I know we had, no, and I'm getting the shake. No, okay. So
Not that we're aware of, I guess. Yeah.
okay. I wasn't aware of any either, but I have
Yeah.
to ask the question because, if you're starting an Airbnb and these types of things in different areas, you do need some health oversight. Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
Makes sense.
Thank you.
Yes, you're welcome.
A motion to open the public.
I so move.
Okay, there's a second. Who said second?
I did.
Okay, Jordan said second. And all in favor, say aye to opening public hearing.
Aye.
Nay? Hearing no nays. Public hearing is open. Anybody wishing to speak for or against this petition, please come to the podium, say your name and address, and tell us your concerns. See anybody? Again, anybody wishing to speak for or against this petition, please come to the podium and express your concerns or interest. State your name and address. Okay, for the third,
Gabby.
Is there anybody online that might?
no.
Okay.
For the third time, is there anybody wishing to speak for or against this petition? Please come to the podium and state your name and address. Seeing none,
I move that we close the public hearing.
Second.
all in favor of closing the public hearing, say aye.
Aye.
Against closing the public hearing, say nay. Hearing none, all in favor. Okay, commissioners. Tell me your wishes or concerns.
I would move to approve this, as it's written with the conditions that are attached.
Do we have a second? And Louis seconds it. Any discussion before we vote? Marcia?
Yep. Okay, so the petitioners have said that they don't intend to expand, but under this, let's see. You know, we have all these rules about building on more homes on less than 40 acres, and we get the variances and things like that. So they have stated that they have no plans to expand, and so that's in the record. So, and I think Eric, did you emphasize if they want to expand, then that will trigger another set of conditional use permits or things like that? Because they, you know, they could be they could be homesteads. I mean,
Correct. Say they wanted to divide it off into a separate parcel and make it a marketable one, then we'd have to review it to the current rules. Less than 40 may require a conditional use permit, and we'd get into some of the hypothetical questions like feedlot setbacks and soil standards and things to that nature. So we continue to react to the inquiries as they come in. Everything's a moving target until we have a set of specifics that we can gauge it.
but as long as they have stated in the record that they
Correct.
have no plans to expand.
We're establishing the record and the baseline new tonight and on to the county board for consideration.
All right.
We dealt with other places, they had camping grounds and they were limited, to 5 sites? Is that right, Eric?
Correct. Some of the thresholds will trigger Department of Health requirements. I think more than 5 camping units requires this, we used to have those inspectors in-house and they regulated beverage, lodging and things to that nature. And that's through the Department of Health and they start to need licenses for
What I was
things.
going as, instead of building annexes or whatever, they may want to take some camping sites in the future.
That's
I mean,
possible.
Then they have to come back here if they want to think that way.
If they gear up for a camping endeavor, we'd have to revisit that,
Okay.
Thanks, Eric.
Yep.
Well, I think it's a very creative use for that site. I mean, I'm all for taking what we exist and expanding it. And my hats off to you for coming up with a creative idea, educational, not only that, and experience. And I think it's a perfect site for that. And I wouldn't want to deny the public the ability to not have a location like that. And it's a nice value-added component to that region. And you're keeping that agricultural theme there. So I speak in favor. I think it's an excellent creative use for that. Buildings exist. There's no construction other than the arena. I understand that. Any other comments before we vote on it? All in favor of the granting this with all the conditions, say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Anybody abstaining? Hearing none. All in favor.
I'm sorry, but maybe for the record, you want to state the 4 conditions on page?
Page 13.
Yeah. I mean, is that what we're agreeing to? I think for
Well, that's.
our record is.
That was the motion.
That was just
It
a
was
motion.
4. Okay, right. I
And the
think we have to be
document.
very, well, we have to, yes, it has to be documented.
Well, I heard you're in favor with the conditions as well as the findings.
Okay.
You didn't delete anything. It's what you see. And there's 4 conditions that we've talked about. black and white. So your next hearing is going to be Thursday, December 5th at 6 PM. It's kind of a change from what we usually do. So it's Thursday, December 5th at 6 PM with the county commissioners. Okay? So you have what you need from us, and it's all in favor. So thank you very much. Thanks for coming. Now we'll move on to our next agenda. We have a tabled dog kennel interim ordinance recommendation by the county board. I wasn't here, but I did the all the notes. And it's been left off at tabling. And my understanding was we're collecting information, right?
Do we need a motion to take that off the table?
Yes, I would like a motion to take it out.
So moved.
I'll second it.
We have a motion to untable this so we can have a discussion on it. All those in favor of taking it off the tabling and having a discussion, I'd say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say nay.
Nay.
So we have one that wants to leave it tabled and may get back to that, but right now it's on our docket to discuss. Let me know where you want to go from here. There's been a lot of information coming back and forth all week. I just got new information from questions. Some of you had a lot of questions. I know Jordan, you asked some, Louis, you had some, Marcia, you had some. As to,
Am I missing some? No, because yes, this is mine. I see that was handed to me now and some things I forwarded Shep, but I didn't see any of the other.
Mine
questions.
are on there, well, at
Oh,
the.
are they? Well, you know,
Yeah.
I have issues with staff handing me things the same night that I'm, unfortunately, I wish I would have got, okay, I do see it in the back here. I just saw this as I sat down. I apologize. It's there. All right.
I guess I'm stating, do we have enough information or did you get your questions asked when I'm asking of the commissioners?
I voted to leave it on the table because I just got handed this. I haven't even had time to look at
I
it.
appreciate that.
I got it 5 minutes ago, before 7. Not knowing I was going to even receive it, I guess is what my issue is.
And many of us are in that position. It's not you, Marcia, I got it too.
Yeah,
Okay.
okay, all right. Yes, I think we all did.
And Doug, I'm sorry, tell us what you know, or
I'm Steve
this is an
Van.
open, right now conversation.
Okay.
It's untabled, so
Okay.
now we're collecting information.
Okay, so I'm Stephen Kranz. I'm Assistant County Attorney. And what I wanted to do to start off is just kind of explain where in the procedure we're at and what exactly you're being asked to decide. I realize this has been kind of a contentious issue, so I think there's been some misunderstanding about the role of staff and the decision that's before you tonight. Is it up? Yeah. So tonight, the Planning Commission is being asked to make a recommendation on a proposed interim ordinance that the okay. Okay, so this is the motion that the county board passed in February. The first motion directed the county to work towards prohibiting new commercial dog breeding kennels. The second motion directed staff to explore the possibility of adopting an ordinance requiring commercial dog breeders to obtain a county-issued business license. And from the so the role of county staff is to carry out the direction of the county board when the board acts as a legislative body. So I know sometimes people have felt that we've been up here as advocates for one side or the other, but the role of the staff is to carry out, if the board takes a vote to direct the staff to do something, that's what the staff is supposed to do. So I just wanted to clarify that from a neutrality standpoint, any staff is just trying to follow the direction of the county board. So an interim zoning ordinance, I think you all are aware that allows the county to adopt a temporary 1-year renewable for a 2nd-year interim ordinance to address an issue that the county determines to be an emergency. Now, I know there's issues over the meaning of the word emergency, and we could talk about that. While the interim ordinance is placed, the county must conduct a study or hold hearings on amendments to the ordinance being addressed. So the process of initiating an interim ordinance is the county board has to make a finding, acting as a board, that there is an emergency. They've already done that. So the planning commissioners are not being asked to decide whether there's an emergency. The county board has already made that finding. Today's meeting is only about the proposed interim ordinance, and the issue being considered is whether the planning commission believes additional study is needed or believes the county already has enough data to move forward with amending the zoning ordinance to ban future dog kennels. And you'll vote on whether you recommended the county board should or should not adopt the proposed interim ordinance, pausing new kennel approval and creating a study period, or should adopt a different ordinance. So you're not deciding whether we should ban dog kennels. You're deciding whether we should designate a study period to determine whether a change is needed related to commercial dog kennels. So the only issue before you really is whether you want to have a time period to study this issue further, get input from all sides and get some professional opinions, whatever the board or the planning commission decides you want to do to make sure everyone is heard on the issue. Or if you want to recommend that we don't do that, in which case the county board will most likely just go ahead with the regular amendment process without additional study. So the purpose of the interim ordinance is to give everybody a chance to have input into whether or not there should be an ordinance. It's not a direct sequential series of steps from interim ordinance to adoption of an amendment. What happens is after the study period, the board will decide whether, based on what they learned during the study period, whether there's a rational relationship between public health, safety, and welfare and the ordinances governing commercial dog kennels, whether that needs to be changed to protect health, safety, and welfare. So at the end of the process, the board will look at what was found during the study period, and then we'll decide whether something needs to be done, or whether not. So it could go either way. It doesn't mean that there will be, if you approve an interim period, it's going to result in a commercial dog kennel. It also doesn't mean that it won't result in a ban on commercial dog kennels. So this is basically the choices at this stage and sort of the procedural posture we're at here. You're going to be recommending either to study the issue further, which would be a moratorium and that study period, or to have no moratorium, in which case staff would carry out the direction it already has from the county board, and then would also, concurrent with the amendment process, research and prepare a recommendation and business license requirement.
Can I ask a quick question
Yes.
here while you're going through the sequence? Why was our initial study initiated October 25th of 2022 rejected?
So in that study, you were asked to study the issue of whether changes were needed to the zoning ordinance as it relates to dog kennels. And you did that. You held a public hearing, you discussed it, you received information from staff, and basically the board, I don't remember exactly what the language was at the meeting, but nothing became of that. It was with your recommendation, nothing, no changes were made at that time.
Recommendation was no changes based on the study.
Right.
This has already been studied. Why do we got to restudy it?
Well, so now the board has determined, and these are arguments that could take place before the board, whether the county should go in this direction or not. But the board has made a determination that the county should move towards banning future dog kennels.
And I think that's an error in the system, because to bring something back to by our own ground rules, the county board, it has to either be significant new information, which none has been provided, or it has to be, and it has to be a 4/5 vote to bring something back to the county board. We have never had a 4/5 vote to bring this issue back to the county board. It's not or, it's and. And I
So
think
if I
staff
hear you
has
right,
given us the wrong
Commissioner,
information.
question of legitimacy of doing this.
Yes.
But again, this board was very thorough. We did 15 reasons why we supported no change. And that happened on April 20th, 2023. Now, here we are, that, was it February or March of 2024? They started working at first slide you showed,
Yeah.
which tells me they just kind of rejected our study of a couple of years. And I thought we did a thorough job on that. And the emergency part, we haven't had an applicant for change. And again, to put this in perspective, we're talking about 10 conditional use permits that have been issued over a 12-year period. There's an imminent danger here. Now, I know you're presenting stuff. I heard you clearly. I have my task. I've been sent a mission from God, or I'm sorry, from the commissioners to present this.
3-2 vote. Everything's been 3-2.
But the moratorium to study this further is just redundant from where we've been. And we included the USDA, Board of Health, licensed through Minnesota, the veterinaries that are in charge of all sites, input from them. And it appears to me that that's all been rejected by the county commissioners. It's not being valid or transparent.
Well, it is a it is a
layers there.
It is a recommendation is all I could say. I mean, those would be questions that would, be presented to the board for answer. I don't have the answers to those questions.
But as legal representation for the county, I feel there's a lot of bias here.
Okay.
And yes, you're taking marching orders from 3 commissioners and then the majority rules. But again, as legal counsel to a elected body, I think all sides haven't really been represented. That you're saying, we're going down a different path here than what we've normally done. And we're doing a much different path than most county boards have done. And I think you're putting us at risk of future litigation and problems. And I think at some point in time, I know you're just the messenger, Karen Sonoman's not here, but sometimes a lawyer has to tell their client that this is not a good idea. And I've never heard anybody from the county attorney's office question the validity of going over this again.
So
You can take that message back to Sonoman, or I'll give her a call in the morning.
Yeah, the rules that you're talking about are board procedural rules, which is something that's sort of between the board and not, I don't even have that information as to what the board procedural
Well, Ms.
rules are.
Sonoman wrote them, so you can check with
Yeah.
her. She helped draft them, put them there. And I've never gotten it straight. I've asked several times, when was the 4/5 vote? And there's an avoidance of an answer. I'll put it that way.
My question is, okay, so we've got 2 proposals that the county board is sending us. Can we vote no on both of them? It's not an either or, is it?
Right, you're choosing, they have a proposed interim ordinance, or you've been presented with a proposed ordinance to impose a temporary moratorium on kennels and study the issue further. So you could recommend that the county board not act on that, not enact that or adopt that interim ordinance, or you could recommend that they do, or you could recommend that they adopt it with changes or adopt a different ordinance or whatever you think whatever the planning commission feels is the right way to go.
Louis,
Mr. Chairman, can we ask the body what has transpired since we found this issue was before the committee and that what has changed?
I agree.
I would like to have the
confused
answer
myself.
to what changed in order for it to come back to this body. Because if it's the same stuff we're dealing with, that's like beating a dead dog to death. Or a dead horse, whatever you want to say.
Call it a horse because we're having a dog.
Yeah, I know.
I remember the report a few years ago. It was about noise to neighbors, proper lighting, proper temperature in the winter, the size of the actual interior kennels. But there's new information in here about how there's no minimum acreage requirement for a dog kennel, CUP. They also say that 3 of the 12 CUPs have no limit to the maximum number of adult dogs. The first 3 conditional use permits that we served. And then the other one that seems to be maybe a major concern for the staff and liability purposes also talks about how we have no follow-up. We have no authority to follow up to even ask the kennel operators to provide information about whether or not they're in compliance. And I really like that statement. Staff have discussed the option of using conditions for annual self-reporting on future CUP applicants and believe this option may have merit. It sounds like we're not really following and being able to monitor and report the conditions of the existing kennels. So if nobody wanted to go ahead with a moratorium and nobody wanted to go ahead with an interim ordinance, how do we even begin to fix those conditions? This is the vehicle for us to be able to do that. Assuming correct?
I'm going to have Eugene first, but there's more to it than that. We did have the staff go to every CUP and inspect it before we voted on
They
this
didn't
last time.
report to us that the first 3 permits issued had no maximum amount of dogs allowed.
But they went to
What's the
every
point
site.
of a Permit,
They found no violations. Well, prior to,
new information
but prior
though.
to 2012, these have been going for over 20 years.
Right,
They
but
didn't even need one back then.
the presentation they gave us did not even address that fact.
Well,
We did not have that information then.
Those
Well,
questions are just since our last meeting, that's
Yeah.
not
No,
stuff
you're
that
getting
triggered the county
clarification,
board.
but I remember the presentation. They didn't say 3 of our permits have no maximum require or limit for dogs.
Well,
We weren't-
Eugene.
We weren't given that information when we did that.
Council,
You.
am I not correct in saying that if these 3 first original dog kennel permits were issued without maximum size, they are grandfathered in, and there isn't a damn thing we can do to change that?
Says right up there.
That's a
When
good
were
point.
those- when were those 3 issued? There were some that go back a very long time. So do we have clarity when those 3 were issued?
I think that was 2015 or
Was it prior to
2016.
the,
Part of that. we
Yeah.
did
right, we didn't
conditional
have them.
use.
Exactly. Exactly. But we also say, and I can't find it, I think almost all our conditional use permits say that staff has the ability to inspect on a yearly, I don't know.
Anytime they want.
Yeah, yeah. So staff can inspect. When you sign a CUP, you're kind of opening up yourself to staff being allowed to inspect. Now, it is an that people don't, it is an animal breeding facility, and you just don't show up without proper, biosecurity, protocols and stuff. So it is a little different than just walking into, a beauty shop or something that's a farm, on a farm.
Even if they have no specific mandate to take action as county officers, if something egregious was going on, there'd be nothing to stop them from reporting it to the Board of Animal Health.
That's correct.
And your veterinarians are held to
Are
a high
on
oath
site,
of,
Plus the USDA if they're shipped anywhere out of state.
Right, right. Now, is it an option for,
John has still got the floor.
is it an option for us to just retable this after we
Yes,
finish talking
yes,
about
it
it?
is.
Okay.
So the ordinance The way the ordinance reads is that the planning commission is required to issue its findings and recommendations within 30 days of the public hearing.
No. Where did you come
Where'd
up
you
with
get
that?
that?
That's 5.4.3. I'm going by 5.4.3, an amendment, and I consider this amendment, maybe I'm wrong, but it says an amendment not issued by the planning commission, which it's not, shall be referred to the planning commission for review and may not be acted upon by the board until it has received the planning commission recommendations. Applications shall be submitted to the planning director. It doesn't say anything in our zoning ordinance, and it's page 65 of under administration of our zoning ordinance. It doesn't give us any of that 30-day stuff.
Well, it says,
Where you came up with that.
I'm sorry, 60 days. The planning commission shall adopt findings based on the record and provide recommendations to the board within 60 days of the planning commission's public hearing. The recommendation shall be to approve the proposed amendment, to disapprove the proposed amendment, or to approve a revised amendment. And then there's a section 6,
Okay, what-
timeline extension,
I know you've thrown that out before.
Okay.
Where is that in our zoning ordinance?
5.4.2.2
5.4.
F.
Marcia, it's in the 2018 amendment. It was a 2018 amendment. So if you're looking at the original documents.
Okay, the problem is the documents don't have dates on them. So maybe I'm looking at an old
Yeah,
one.
so if you go to our website, see the amendment.
So what's the penalty if we don't do it in 60 days? It's always a penalty for something.
Well, the ordinance, number 6, sort of towards the last end of the page, last page there, basically gives the county board the ability to extend the timeline at its discretion, but there's no provision in there for any other entity to extend the timeline.
Well, it sounds like,
Is this state, I'm sorry, is this state statute or is this just something we came up with?
That's your ordinance. The state doesn't even require it to come before the planning
No, it's
commission.
just something we did locally.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, all right. So there's no real penalty.
but based on your first slide, it was this side or this side.
Right.
Yeah.
Catch 22, right? They're gonna do what they want to do anyway.
You're guilty until isn't it, you're innocent until proven
And you
guilty?
can tell we're all frustrated because we've heard this for 2 years. You've had 2 years to study it from October to now. And you need 2 more years up to study it?
Well, I'm sorry,
What?
who's going to study it? Because we feel.
Well, I asked that question 2
Yeah, this
months ago.
board has felt they've studied it. We had a very detailed report. Unfortunately, the previous Assistant County Attorney, Stephanie Nuttall, is no longer here. She did a lot of work on this. She is not here. So who's going to study it? And who's going to perform, I say, an impartial study?
Well, it's a legislative process, so
No,
there's.
just who's going to study it? I got answers from our planning director that staff is overworked. They don't have time to do it. Are you going to go out and study dog breeding? Who's going to do the study? Is that going to fall on this group again? And we had at that time, we had all the officials come or Zoom in, doctors, veterinarians, animal board of health and everything. So who's going to study it?
That would be for the county board to decide.
There's another aspect of this that, as some of you know, my wife was previously a county employee. And what was it, about 15, 18 years ago? There was a huge drop in the amount of funding for operating the county. Some, really, I thought some controversial things, kind of had to be done, which is cutting loose the nursing, what's the?
Public health.
Public health.
Home nursing.
So what we're looking at here, and things are at a stasis right now, as far as I know, but in 2 years, we could have more cuts. And what we're talking about here now is either diverting staff from their current work to not only do this other job, but also to train to do it, because it's got to have some kind of training to be able to evaluate things. And it just seems like, gee, I think there are better ways to use the county money, considering all the slashes that have already been made to the budget in the past.
I don't,
Yeah.
to clarify, I don't think there's a proposed amendment that would increase the county's inspection at this time. What's being considered, or what the board has discussed, is a moratorium on new kennels. The existing kennels would be grandfathered in and would still be regulated in the manner they are now. Presumably, that would potentially save staff resources because there would be no new kennels that they would have to issue cups for.
How many new kennels have you done in the last 2 years?
Zero.
There you have.
That answers your question.
Do we open ourselves up for any sort of peril should we find ourselves taking in more information and just CUPing this correction without doing any additional ordinance? And I'm going to rephrase that and saying, do we run into any sort of legal consequence if someone's CUP is 3 conditions and someone else's is 9? Because we've taken in more information, we're more informed, but we haven't updated any ordinance to show our review process is a bit more, has a bit level of, has a stricter scrutiny on some of these topics that we've brought up in these questioning. Do we open ourselves up, the county, to any legal consequence or any sort of peril there?
I mean, from a practical standpoint, there could be an equal protection issue if 2 properties were similar situated and they were given different conditions, which could result in that kind of problem. Part of the problem in relation to that, though, that in reviewing the record that I've seen, is that the county has been learning more with each conditional use permit that it's issued. And so there's no uniformity among the conditional use permits. And if it's going to issue a new conditional use permit for a commercial dog breeding kennel, it's not clear that they have the information they need to know what conditions to impose that would protect the public health, safety, and welfare as the comprehensive plan.
I'd like to ask that. What is the public health?
What is
our?
I could make the argument that if we don't,
What effects are we gonna have from these people raising dogs?
there could be a moral injury to having practices that take an animal that we all know to be significant to humanity and treating them poorly. There could be moral injury to that.
I'll tell you, there is one incentive called capitalism, and if they treat their dogs crap, they will not sell their dogs. Their dogs will die on them. They are treating them well and fine in order to have an income. That's capitalism.
Well, if you're on, when we have the state inspecting it, we have the feds inspecting, where everyone has a vet, they can't trip their dog until it has all its shots. And we haven't gotten complaints from them. So they just can't throw out a product that's substandard because that violates Minnesota statutes in chapter 343, 346, 347, also rules and Minnesota statute 1721.049 through 1721.0520, and that's state law.
Which would allow us to
Trump it.
revoke their CUP.
Absolutely.
Case.
They violate that, they lose their conditional use permit.
Okay, thank you for that.
Here's one other item going on this. If they're doing such a bad job, USDA can come in and shut you right down today. They did that to some livestock operators. They can do the same thing to the dog operators. If they're that mistreated, you think they are, USDA has the authority to shut them down.
If they're abusing a dog or any animal, really, you call the sheriff.
Sheriff's in charge.
If you're abusing not just dogs, any animal, you could be arrested for that. Do we have anything on the police record on that?
I believe that was answered in the questions.
That was-
Is there a record? I think
I
we
think it
have.
was 0, wasn't it?
Well, one thing I remember previously, I didn't look at this document, but Sheriff Gannon told me he had a couple barking dog complaints, and we addressed that with a barking dog ordinance.
Right.
It didn't deal with the breeding of dogs. One of the questions, we talk about animal units in this county. Where do we come up with 5? So, so 4 has no rules or regulations, right? 4 breeding animals, there are no rules or regulations. 5?
But dogs are not an animal unit.
No, but I mean, in our
It was
ordinance,
arbitrarily.
yeah,
called
I mean,
arbitrary.
there's no science behind 5. Is there any science,
Well, that maybe speaks to a problem with the current ordinance.
pardon me?
Maybe that speaks to a problem with the current ordinance if that's an arbitrary number that was selected by the county.
Well,
I
again,
wouldn't wanna-
there's arguments that, and to Shep's point is that the zoning ordinance is a land use. Yes, we get emotional and drawn into the moral and the responsibility of raising animals, but, again, as if it's a breeder or even an individual, even if an individual is abusing, that should be reported also. If somebody with 4 animals is abusing, there's none of these conditions, nobody knows about it, but if the neighbor knows about it or it's getting it, yeah, that should be reported. We don't want animal abuse in this county by any means. And the public is played with the ASPCA ads, and they come across heavy at Christmas time, and they've been carried through. And I did have a long conversation with a veterinarian from Lewiston, and he said, those situations aren't dog breeders. They're people that got dogs and it got out of control and they don't know how to handle it. They don't know how to control it. That's not a bona fide breeding, facility. It's something that's gone terribly awry. And the ASPCA really pulls at your heartstrings when you see those things. But that should be held for it. Yes.
Deal with that.
Yes. No.
Okay.
Yes, more than 4. Back 1970 zoning ordinance.
Okay.
Better boiler template stuff that most of the counties got as their template when they first came up with their very first zoning ordinances.
All right.
And it survived. A lot of counties took that section out over time, but
Okay.
we ended up.
Yeah. And the other thing too, the city of Winona has no ordinance about dog breeding. Technically, you're only supposed to have 2 licensed dogs per household. Technically, that they'll issue 2 licenses, but there is nothing about breeding within the city of Winona. Now, I don't know other small cities if there's any concerns there.
So do I hear you correctly? We have nothing on our ordinance about dog kennels in general? Could someone have a dog kennel in the middle of a city?
You mean breeding?
Just as it reads here for
Breeding.
what we're discussing.
We can't.
We
But
can't
you don't
do anything
regulate
with
City of
that.
Winona, that's a separate.
Apologies. Thank you. So, in a, say,
Are you thinking about boarding kennel?
or even just like, as we get to like that first township out, I'm out in Lewiston. Could anyone in my, just out, the city is the other side of 14,
Mhm.
anyone that's just that close to a city could have a dog kennel at any size lot?
If you're in the city of Lewiston, they control their own ordinance.
But if it's
If you're out in
county,
the township though.
then it's
this
this.
list.
Got it. Thank you.
So I'm not clear about what we were talking about before. We are being asked, right, to decide whether to recommend the county proceed with making ordinances or study for a year or 2. Am I wrong about that?
So you have an interim ordinance before you that is what you're being asked to recommend on. And it basically is an interim ordinance to study the issue and allow for a moratorium while the issue is studied. And then based on that study, it would be the intention of the board to review what was found and see if changes were needed.
So the vote would only be for further study or not further study.
Right.
It
But
would not be recommending the county to proceed with ordinances,
Right,
right?
and the clarification that I made earlier that I just think you need to be aware of is that the motion was passed to move forward with banning future commercial dog breeding kennels. So this is an opportunity to review that before before it happens without an adequate basis for whatever decision is made.
Okay, thank you. Now, I think I've got it now.
But the county board can override all of that. They could just immediately, the next county board meeting, which it's been asked to be put on our agenda, put a ban, right? They
Well-
can totally
Sure.
disregard what this group advises.
We're just advisory.
Right,
Yeah, you're
Right.
giving a recommendation.
right. So they could just do what they want to do. Next meeting with no restrictions.
But again, we've struggled to get information. It's a further study. What more information?
Can you come up with?
And this is a limited number of people, farms, 10 active, right? With hardly any growth in this industry for the last 2 years. So again, back to Marcia, it's like, is this emotionally driven? Is this labeling anybody that is a dog breeder, quote, the puppy mill, which I don't believe they are? They're abusers, which we haven't found documentation for. So I think we're unfairly labeling these businesses. And the moratorium means you can't expand. And usually in industry, when you can't expand and there's no more there, kind of slam the door shut and it just kind of goes down from there, right? I mean, there'd be no transfer then when they're sell or move on or whatever. That's the end of that conditional use permit, right?
No,
No,
no.
no one
You
could
actually
use it.
have value to the few that have
Might
it,
have it.
if it's still economically viable for
Now,
them.
if I heard right, 6 of them do have limits,
They have limits, but they can, that conditional use permit goes with the land.
but only the limit that we put on them.
Yes,
And I asked for that information and I
expansion.
didn't get it. When I
Yes.
asked how many dogs
You're
does
absolutely,
this involve? And back in that discussion, I guesstimated there's 12,000 dogs in this
right, and
county.
that was, yes.
For breeding purpose,
No,
just in general.
yeah. So whose problem dog belongs to who?
We're just-
Barking, whatever. And if these 9 breeders will have even 1,000 dogs, which I don't believe they have, but could be wrong, that's only 8%. How can this be such an urgent crisis? Other than we just kind of want to take them out and we just don't want anything in this area. In my opinion, if you don't have a licensed, documented state and federal approval with a vet on site, isn't that encouraging a puppy mill of the worst possibility? Because you're kind of zoning out any potential for having this industry expand, right? Where do dogs come from? Where do those other 9,000 dogs come from? Or in my case, I said 12, so where the other 11,000 come from? Backyard breeding? Well, who knows? I don't know.
Yeah, so one of the questions I asked is, what conditional use permit currently issued in Winona County are not in compliance with their permits? And I asked for specifics, and my answer is, when staff conducted inspections at the beginning of 2023, there were no issues of non-compliance identified. So that
That's-
was the question of
And-
what's changed or what's
I
different.
think, though, what that answer is we don't know, because the last time it was looked at was 2023.
How
We
many
visited
of these
every site.
We visited, that they checked the records and such, so I don't think you can say that. I don't think you've been to the sites, and I don't think the planning director's been to the sites, and I'm not sure on staff has been to the sites, but this is
We
in black
visited
and
every
white.
site, right?
Yeah, it just says conducted inspection, so I don't know if you only
Mm-hmm.
didn't conduct all it doesn't say, but I mean, again, we're
Oh,
not,
no major
to
problems.
Louis' question, what's changed? What's different? It's saying there's no issue of non-compliance with the existing conditional use permit.
Jordan.
So it seems like we have two choices of a moratorium or just moving ahead without doing anything here. Can we suggest to adopt the interim ordinance without the moratorium?
Yes, you can.
Being that there's no applications coming in,
Mhm.
it would mean that the study would be conducted again, but there would be no moratorium. The other option is they just go ahead with banning it. Correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Well, if we have this study, do we have to do the study before the county board or?
No, you're not being asked to do a study at this point. And the county board needs to determine what that study is going to entail. You're just being asked whether you are recommending the county have a moratorium and do a study, as has been proposed.
Well, I know.
Now, and if the ordinance did change, if after the interim, whatever ordinance ended, if the county board did change the ordinance, it would go through its regular land use amendment process. So it would, I assume it would end up back before you, the final changes that the board wants to do, if they choose to.
Now, the county's gonna, next year, I don't know at what point, I don't think it's been decided, look into a new comprehensive plan and do their 10-year update. Why isn't this thrown into that pile?
As I saw the request go out for bids on the comprehensive plan, it occurred to me that that would be a reason to adopt an interim ordinance to study the issue, because it could track the comprehensive planning and make sure that if whatever results that are found, that they match the county plan as its comprehensive plan as it's updated.
My question is, why do we have to have a moratorium to update the comprehensive plan? I mean, nobody's sitting here is reading us down for more dogs. There's no problems with any of the dogs. Everything is working like it should. My old dad said, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And that's what we're doing here.
Anyway, we're beating around the bush
Yeah, I
right
know.
now. Do you have a lot more to present?
No, that's the last slide.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Good dog.
Okay, commissioners. What do you want to do?
Jordan, would you repeat the question you asked in terms of the vote that we could bring forth tonight would move forward with interim ordinance, but not include a moratorium?
Yeah, so it was presented as if our options were to recommend the interim ordinance with the moratorium or not recommend it, which would mean they would move ahead with the vote. But I think there's a third option where we could recommend that they study it with the interim ordinance, but not have a moratorium in place.
One thing if may I talk?
Yes.
One thing, just sort of sensing the mood of where you're going with this, one possibility would be to adopt a resolution that basically says, we researched this issue a year ago, made the following findings, and we have, in our judgment, nothing has changed since then. And so we do not believe a moratorium is needed and do not recommend that. It would basically give you the opportunity to make the point that this has been researched and all the things you found before on that. If in your judgment, none of that has changed and it impacts whether you recommend or don't recommend a course of action.
Yeah.
Can you reference when, I know I can dig for it, when was that document part of the planning commission? What date was that?
It was
The one that he's
April
talking about? It
20th,
was April 20th. It's page
2023.
32 of your packet.
But I mean, it's Stephanie Nuttall.
Well, this is what we passed.
Yeah.
It doesn't have
The
the
research,
500 pages
Yeah.
of all the stuff that went into it.
Yeah.
Because we had public hearings,
yes.
whole 9 yards. Studied it, sent the staff to every conditional use permit that we had. See how they were doing. And that document's still available by request.
Yes,
So there's a ton of research.
right.
I'd recommend that we,
You did request that, but that didn't come back.
well,
with the
it,
Info.
it just gets,
Cumbersome.
yeah, there's a lot of material. But I would request if we stay with what we passed on the
go to hell?
20th of April, 2023, that all the supporting documentation be forwarded to the county commissioners. Public hearing, everything starting way back to October 25th. And I know we have that on file. And the only reason I want that is just to show how thoroughly we worked on this. I mean, we did our due diligence for those of you that were on this commission. And it's, well, it's just frustrating that no matter what we did, the emotions come in and this and that. And I trust my USDA that they have some credibility. I trust the Board of Health for the state of Minnesota. I trust the Department of Agriculture. And it's not one vet here. We're dealing with multiple veterinarians that deal with these particular breeding.
We're dealing with vets that deal with canine.
And that's their specialty.
Yeah. And I'd still like to know what diseases they pose to the public that's so emergency for now.
Well-
That is one question I'd like to know.
Well, as I read the 10 points and that are 15, they start on page 29. This is the county boards. And they end on page 30. We had 15 reasons why we did what we did. They seem to have 15 reasons that they don't want to go with that.
The emergency was declared by the Minnesota Attorney General, just in general.
And as we've talked tonight, some of us are confused about the emergency. Public health emergency. We're not talking about dogs. We're talking about people here. That reference citizens. Of course, we care about the welfare of the dog, but they're using the citizens. Safety and welfare. I haven't heard any dogs with rabies or anything of that nature.
It's rabies, distemper.
But the documentation coming from Marcia's board, signed by Commissioner Vagley, it's a stretch. I'm sorry, but they worked on the verbiage of that a long time. So, okay, it comes back to where we want to be, and I think re-articulating where we've been tonight, just rehashing that we've been here, we've done this. We've given two options as far as what the county board wants. We gave them an option on what we wanted on April 20th last year, 2023. Do we want to stick with that?
One of my sticking points is that if we go along with this quote study, again, who's going to do the study? And, you know, exactly what do we want out of the study and how is it an impartial study? We've heard at the public hearings, we've heard all the people who are opposed to, we've heard very few people that are, couple that were neutral. And we didn't have any, to tell you the truth, we didn't have any breeders present their side of the, you know, the issue, which is, again, it's their right to, and it's their responsibility to, but they felt why would, and again, the Amish who are predominantly the breeders they're not confrontational people. It's not within their DNA and their chemistry to come and speak to a public hearing and defend what they do on their, you know, their private property. Not that they're not, they are very willing, they're open to all the inspections. I've talked to some of them, you know, where the veterinaries come, the USDA, the Animal Board of Health, all come in and they're allowed to come into their facilities. But they're not the kind of people that are going to step up to the mic at a public hearing and say, I do this and I'm doing this all very good and everything. And again, I've been exposed to they're trying to do some, and I apologize, it's either University of Pittsburgh or University of Pennsylvania or something. It's a very intense breeding program to improve animal behavior, the socialization of the animals and all those things. They're working hard to get those things in place. So again, how would we get an impartial, non-biased study done?
How many of your commissioners ever visited one of these sites?
I visited, I know Josh Elsing visited, but the other three have not, to my knowledge.
So they've never visited the site that you're aware of?
that I'm aware of.
Because I know a lot of the testimony that I wasn't here, I read about it. St. Paul, a couple of them. I mean, again, it's the emotional thing, brings out everybody. But it does, their presentation fit with what we're talking. John?
I make a motion to retable this resolution.
Working on it.
Okay, we have a motion to table. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay,
I voted not to take it off the table.
okay. All in favor of tabling this resolution, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed to tabling, say nay.
Nay.
So we got two nays, or do we have more? Just two? And that's important. We need to have that documented. Yeah. So 6 in favor of tabling and 2 opposed. Thank you.
Did you want a roll call, Mr. Chairman?
No,
We
no,
don't need a.
no, it's good enough.
Same as last month.
Well, we table it until December 17th. Is that what I said? Is that the third Tuesday, third Thursday of December? 19th. Since Marcia, I just want to remind you that it was October 17th, so that could be 31 days or 61 days. Yeah.
Okay.
See how that changes.
Yeah. I would ask staff, whoever created this document that was handed out, would you please put a date on it? And when we received it? It's part of my angst.
Just for clarification, to what end are we tabling? What do you want from staff in the meantime? Do you need more information? Is there something that, that you're asking for? Is that why we're tabling it or?
I haven't been-
Okay, so that's the reason. You just want to read the document?
Some of them really weren't answered. The one is, let's see, I thought, we wanted specific copies of the existing conditional use permits because we've alluded that some have X number of conditions and some. have
So
one.
if you don't tell us, then we can't get you that stuff. So you just need to make sure that you communicate with us and, okay.
So I want all the members to contact the staff to be more thorough. No, I hate to say this, but I think a lot of our questions don't have answers.
Yep, and I just want to say that that's fine. To me, listening, I'm just kind of a wallflower, listening to the conversation. I heard multiple points being made over and over and over again. And to me, I think the answer is clear what you want to do, and that's to recommend to not go forward with a moratorium. And it's fine to make that finding and to make that recommendation.
But we have to do it so it stands up in a court of law. And I don't think things have been documented enough. I'm not a lawyer, but I got a few in my back
Well-
pocket. And it has to be documented, what we're doing and why we're doing it.
I think we have good documentation. I take your point, though,
Yes.
clearly that we do have to bring this to a conclusion sometime. And it may be we go back to what we passed a while back, maybe we modify it, I don't. But the search, as I read it, we're getting kind of the same answers, only in a different verbiage, presented in a different way when I read Jordan's stuff, when I read your stuff. And I echo what I've said and it comes back. So we're being it done. So tonight, though,
Your answer.
we have tabled it. Okay?
Right.
That's
Sounds good.
concluded.
And if I could just, I'm Doug Cieslak, I'm the planning director, environmental services. And if I could just speak to process a little bit, because we were getting a bunch of questions that were coming in. When we received the questions from Commissioner Ward, at the time, I didn't understand whether those questions were coming in from the county board or those were coming in from the commission. So in the future, what I would propose is that you bring all your questions to the chair, and then the chair would bring those to us.
I could do that.
And then we would then disseminate them to the chair, and the chair would get them back to you. If there's legal questions that you're going to ask, I'm also going to have to run that through the administration. Their resources are more limited even than ours. And so spending county legal resources, I would rather have that go through the administration as well.
And don't get me wrong, I'm not blaming staff. I just think this is something that staff is having to spend an awful lot of time on that has a low priority because we said there's no problem. We don't see the emergency. We don't see anything that's changed, but we've put staff, county board has put staff at a very bad position. We got other things to do. We're going to talk about cannabis. Now, it's a hotter topic that has more implications for a lot of people than not attacking staff, but I like to ask lots of questions. I just always
And we're happy to answer them as,
you are.
right. And,
Tough.
and then all of that comes in with all the other work that we're doing, sanitary permits, that kind of thing. So.
Speaking of that, I don't know who's gonna do the cannabis introduction here. We got that on our next slide.
I don't know what slide, is that?
Because we tabled the ordinance.
Yes.
I think the
Now we're
ordinance is
the
going to
next
be,
subject.
I think the ordinance is going to be Eric and
Eric,
then
okay.
process. I might speak to process a little bit.
Well, that's the issue.
Yeah, they'll change. We'll put something in place in the state of Minnesota.
Do you have anything further you want to tell us on the cannabis here or? Other than I've been trying to follow the state of Minnesota, as many of you have too, and it's really confusing
And I
where they're
think
gonna
public
go.
health, you had a document, but was that in here, Emily? No. No, okay, so while they're gathering, we've asked, county commissioners are in charge of public health. State of Minnesota is in charge of public health. We're trying to get, also public health to weigh in to any ordinances that affect our citizens. And they did finally come up with something and Emily presented it at last county board meeting, but it's not in here. So.
Okay. Well, staff has prepared just a brief PowerPoint, just kind of on some of the notes and some of the internal meetings and some of the conclusions that we've walked away with. And I guess also this is in response to, the number of handouts that we've given the Planning Commission probably a couple of months leading up to this. So I just wanted to touch on a couple of things. And, we got other staff here that'll probably jump in and kind of weigh in on it too. There's 13 different license types of cannabis. We're mainly focusing on the retail end of things. And very clearly, local unit of government, whether you're a city or a county, you have to allow these businesses, but the only domain that we have is regulating the time, place, and manner of these type of businesses. And the statutes are still being drafted. I believe the final rule revisions will not be done by the state until early 2025. But depending on which press that you're seeing, they're trying to get out a first round of preliminary approvals that will go out perhaps as early as next month. And I think as a county, that's what we're bracing ourselves for, is to try to at least have a protocol how we're going to react when those come in. There's a lot of framework yet to be figured out. Everybody from the sheriff's office to the auditor treasurer to the assessor's office to community health. There's going to be a number of departments that are going to be involved with this. In most cases, our county has already created 2 moratoriums or interim ordinances. One was to prohibit the use of cannabis products in public spaces or public parks. So that was accomplished already by the Planning Commission and the County Board. The second was a moratorium on new businesses, which is technically set to expire January 1st, 2025. So you have every city and every county now trying to rush and and usher in some type of framework on how they're going to regulate these things. Again, in our domain, we can regulate hours of operation, that's time, zoning districts in which we would allow or identify the uses and require setbacks. Manner would be performance standards that we can get into as far as signage, lighting, parking, outside storage, those type of things. A lot of this is going to be based on tobacco and alcohol sales as far as the registrations go. And that's where the auditor treasurer is going to have to be brought into some higher level meetings to decide how that's going, what that's going to look like. Because there is stipulations on the amount of licenses that we can charge. I think 500 is the max, or maybe 1,000 for the mezzo. And law enforcement, the stipulations are is that they would have to do some background checks, and they would have to do at least, they're compelled to do compliance inspections of these businesses at least once a year. And they actually have kind of the methodology spelt out according to statute of what they're entitled to do.
Eric,
Mhm.
what do you mean when you say background checks?
Well, I think before they give a license, they have to make sure, I don't know. I mean, that's my best question, because actually the first round was people that we called social equity. That means they run afoul, they've had some black marks on their record already, but they're given preference already to get their foot in the door if they cleaned up their act and all the things are in line for them. But I've heard there was 1,800 pre-applications. They rejected 2/3 of them. So now,
Who rejected them?
the Office of Cannabis Management. But we've notified, in the press that we've seen, there was at least 4 in the city of Winona. There was one in the city of St. Charles, one in the city of Lewiston, and one in the city of Minnesota City.
Rejected?
Well, no, that applied. We don't know the status of them.
Okay.
But I guess maybe that's to relay that there's an interest out there. We probably will get some applications. That's the short of the matter.
Certain things that you've done in your past that actually move you up the line. And
I
think
guess,
addicted
but
to marijuana, and that's expunged
Yeah.
now.
yeah.
You may move higher up on the.
And it's demographics too. And Winona, just in general, Winona County and the city of Winona fits under that classification because of, I think, income guidelines. So it puts some of these southeastern counties in that reach of that. The land use table in existing zoning districts was our first attempt to match up what we have in our Winona County zoning ordinance for our unincorporated areas where these type of uses would be located. You can see that the CL is primarily what we have decided is staff's recommendation for a route to undergo permitting. You can see the key below the CL means it'd be a conditional or interim use base. E means permitted. That means that either over-the-counter permit or it's just permitted by rule. And where the testing facility and the one that isn't answered because some counties were getting carried away with these low potency type products. They're either drinkables or the gummy bears, and they're already out there. They're profoundly out, in the retail establishments already. And that's something that we felt didn't need to be regulated in our zoning ordinance at this point. It's governed by state. They've already got regulations in that arena for those products, and we didn't need to address those. That was kind of staff's feeling too. Let's see. The one that a lot of counties are struggling with are the temporary cannabis events with a mass gathering, and some of them are revisiting other sections of their ordinance just to bring those in, like their mass gathering, if they're 500 people or more, and whether that's, to use those or not. But again, we identified which districts we could hypothetically see those, and we recommended a conditional use or interim use permit to allow those type of events.
Who's the botanist in your group? what is the crop considered? Because we're really restricting the cultivation. And you know, we like small little farms in Winona County and you know, what crop can you grow in a small quantity and yet make money to pay your property taxes with something like this, I hate to say. So
Yeah.
it's not an agricultural product of marijuana is not considered or
Well, part of this.
hemp was, I thought,
Well,
at one
hemp,
time?
I mean, it goes on the THC, obviously. But a bigger thing, when the state ruled this out, they've green lighted the home grower to grow so
We have
much.
so many,
And so I guess the sticking point has always been for us, are you gonna hang a sign, you're gonna entice people to come in, and are you gonna sell to them? That's a commercial activity, and then it's a commercial use that's subject to that.
you can only grow so many, yeah, and I know there's a.
There's a
limit to the
plant limit
But
and
is
a
it
pollen limit.
seriously, non-agricultural product? Because, you know, the hemp was heavily used
It's,
in what, rope and, and,
yeah, there could be hemp, there could be cannabis, there could be,
but it's.
again, it's the THC valuation is really gonna,
Be able to test that,
no.
they maybe.
Yeah, we'd go by the state.
Pardon me?
Didn't you hear up in the cities, they had one group up there, got them on the rack because they had a little bit higher THC.
No.
You know, they're about like 7-8 times higher than
No.
what they were supposed to
Yeah,
sell.
yeah, it's a real gray area.
And there is testing then that will be done by the OCM. I think they're going to be subject to certain, and if they're over those thresholds, sounds like that's going to be the quickest way to get your license pulled from the state, is if you're not coming in within that threshold.
Don't mandate that down to the county level,
Correct.
which, you know, they have done in the past on
Um,
certain things.
The next slide is setbacks. Again, staff recommending some minimums. School would be 500 feet, maximum can be set at 1,000. Childcare center would be 250 feet, maximum could be double 500. Residential treatment facility, 250, could be set at 500. Public park, including playground or athletic field, I would recommend 250, maximum could be 500. And we're just putting this out there for a discussion point, because in some of the guidelines that we gave to the planning commission, we marked up some highlighted sections that was intended to have a discussion to get consensus building on the planning commission in order to move something forward to the county board. A discussion point that staff had is setbacks in general. You know, we talked about historically the feedlot setbacks, how we once applied a feedlot to a property line, and that became problematic. If we specify the setbacks, do we want it to be applied to a structure to structure or a structure to lot line? Those are some of the fine points that we'd have to try to decide, just so for enforcement or clarity's sake, we know how to gauge or judge or review an application, so that we wouldn't have to determine that a variance of some kind would have to be obtained prior to a conditional use permit. So those are some of the things that we'd want to get input from the feedback from the planning commission.
Do these, and we're trying to put something on before, the end of the year.
Yeah.
Then how do we change them? What's our,
No.
is it a 4/5 vote to change the ordinance, or is there significant new data? How does it get changed?
Okay, I'd yield that one to council on.
Okay. I mean, we're dealing with the
Um,
same thing. They want
yeah.
to change them, but now if we're trying to, and again, it's a moving, the
Yeah.
state hasn't got, it's a moving target.
I got one question with this. Could we lump all these places into one little area? In the whole county? Is that possible?
You could have a sole prescriptive ordinance and setbacks, as long as you can allow one, then you might be
Put them all in
legal
one area.
standing. But yeah, you can't make it so prohibitive that you're going to zone them out, then you're going to be ripe for a legal challenge. It's the same as, yeah, the adult entertainment, we had a year's worth of moratoriums and work sessions. And the message with that program was you had to allow them somewhere, but you really could, prohibit or restrict it. It's just, you'd have to be providing at least a narrow window you can't zone them completely out of your
I'm not
regulations.
suggesting zoning them out. I'm just saying, putting them in one spot. So law enforcement would probably like that because they could watch them better. They turn around, they couldn't turn around and inspect them. They didn't have to go all over the county.
I'm guessing that if anything is kind of going to take a discriminatory approach to it, that's going to be ripe for a challenge. That's just what I've heard a lot of attorneys talking about on this. The other point is that a lot of them are looking at some type of density restriction. Because I think the state has set the baseline. They said we can prohibit these to allowing 1 per 12,500 residences. And where this is kind of now being deliberated is cities versus counties. Some cities are not going to want to touch this and they're delegating to their respective county. So then the county can set the baseline. Staff has had some preliminary discussion with the city of Winona, and it sounds like they're not going to prohibit them, but they're adding them to their zoning code to follow their liquor and their brewery and some of their microbrewery and some of their other businesses, and they're loading up on performance standards on where and how one of those could come through in the city of Winona. But if the county prohibit, the questions that are coming up is if the county enacted a density, it's only effective for the cities that delegate back to the county, or townships we would expect would mainly delegate back to the county. So there would be a density control of allowing them if we're going to go that route. But yeah, there's a lot of delegation that we're going to have with all the cities. We don't know yet, like this, mainly the smaller ones, but like I said, there's an interest that's been shown in some of the mid-sized cities like Lewiston, St. Charles, Rolling Stone, Minnesota City, perhaps. And how they register those, are they going to delegate that to the county? And are they going to, they'd still have to oblige by their zoning framework. That means their city councils are going to have to issue conditional use permits. Our planning commission cannot take zoning actions on proposed businesses that are within city limits. That is
What if
the
they
matter.
did zoning, they this unwritten rule, because we had a few townships that used to do their own, and you had to do everything. You couldn't pick and choose. So the cities could decide not to do it and hand it over to the county?
Just the registration part of it.
Just the
Yeah,
registration.
we'd be fish out of water if we were trying to judge a conditional use permit for a zoning district that we have no knowledge of how it would be operating under. So that's one question we have. Okay, and staff had a roundtable discussion, and this last slide is just where we're at this point as far as status. We need to, I guess, adopt a zoning ordinance amendment of some kind of how that's going to read, just so we have a place marker in our ordinance on basically the worst case scenario that we get something dropped on us in January. Looking for a planning commission recommendation on some of those discussion points. And there could be a county board adoption as early as January 7th, 2025, moving that forward. Creation of a retail registration ordinance, and that would be heavily determined by the AT, or the Auditor Treasurer's Office. We need to determine the extent of jurisdiction and whether we're limiting the number of registrants. Outreach to cities and townships. In retail registration delegation agreements from the cities and towns. Again, compliance checks to the county sheriff's department. They need to be brought into the discussion. I'll hand it over to Steve and Doug and Lou and Olivia, or anybody else wants to jump in on any of these.
Thank you, Eric.
Yeah, first of all, yep.
The only thing I wanted to add is that there's like a timing problem because this would be a nice place to have an interim ordinance while this all gets figured out, but the statute says that no interim ordinance could have a moratorium past January 1st, 2025. And the rulemaking is not going to be done until early 2025. So it's not even clear that we can have everything we need in place before the potential comes that an application could happen. And the way it's set up, and I don't know if this was explained, but they apply through the state and then they get a preliminary approval from the state, and then the state checks with us to see if they meet the zoning requirements or the time, place, manner requirements we have. And if all that is in place, then the state issues them a preliminary approval, and then they come to us to get their registration at the county auditor. And the time, place, and manner restrictions that we could do, of course, have to be reasonable, and we can't have a moratorium. And we're sort of at I guess, a little bit at the mercy of the Office of Cannabis Management as far as if they're going to give preliminary approvals before they've finished rulemaking, because the rulemaking may impact what we want our ordinances to be. So one thing we've discussed, at least a relatively small thing we could do, but to have the county board pass a resolution saying that we'll start processing applications after the rulemaking is done, when we've had time to do our ordinances and determine what the time, place, manner restrictions need to be. It's given that there's a rule against a moratorium, and that is sort of a moratorium. It's only a resolution, but at least it's something until the county has the information it's need, and you guys have the information you need to figure out if the county has all its bases covered. And then I was just going to mention on the background checks, the background check is the state may require a background check as part of that preliminary approval. It's not necessarily required, but there are quite a few criteria for being preliminary approved. I thought it was at least a little encouraging that they rejected so many applications in this first round. So I don't know what the remaining applications look like, but at least that looks like they're, doing some vetting at that level.
This is really a weak approach to doing
Well,
regulations. And it's not the
it is,
county,
you know.
it's the state of Minnesota
Yeah.
that has put us in this situation. And, so a lot of this is based on the retail sales, but I have bigger concerns about the growing, the cultivating, the processing. And so we list them, they would be a conditional use permit. Say somebody wants to come in here and process. I suppose the conditional use permit would allow us to say, no, you got to be, so many feet from another resident or from a school or anything, but it's just a
Yeah.
real weak approach to
I think,
zoning.
and I think visually industrial hemp looks exactly like marijuana with THC. So there's an issue of knowing what's being grown if someone were a grower.
Get the good seed from the Netherlands, yeah.
Yeah, it's not the way
I have
things should
one
be done.
question back again I asked. Is there anything in state law, zoning or whatever, that we could lop all these places in the county in one spot?
No,
No.
no, that would be.
Yeah, so, and also as was mentioned, there's, the least number we could have is one per 12,500 residents. And that's if all the municipalities delegate to the county, because each town could have its own. So each town, if they don't delegate, then they have to have one per 12,500 or have to accept a registration of one per 12,500 people. So with Winona delegating, as was mentioned, it will just be the townships, and then whatever cities don't delegate, that would go into the number of people that we divide 12,500 into to determine how many the county has to register.
So in the history of the state of Minnesota, where else have we said you have to have a minimum? Did we sell, you had to sell so many packages of cigarettes? Did we sell, you had to sell so many bottles of booze? Where in our history have we ever told them you have to have this many outlets for something? It's just a,
Yes.
Do I understand the ordinance that it's the municipality, so the city, I'm out in Lewiston, we have 700 people. That they, at minimum, have to review one.
Only if they
Just
delegate.
cities, not townships.
Right.
Okay, great.
So anybody who doesn't delegate, if they receive registration requests, they have to grant at least one.
Well, it's if they get
That's
an
it.
application.
Yeah, if-
So if there's not a need, they don't have to
no.
build one or something.
Just on that comment, I think I seen press yesterday from Olmsted County. And the city of Rochester delegated to Olmsted County, but they have two cities that wanted it. So you have Pine Island and, maybe Zumbrota, they want to take it on. But then for the city of Rochester and all the other small cities and all the townships, I think they set the number at 14 based on their population. And that's a lot of people.
Sounds about right.
They want to open gas and grass stores. Have people stop from the highway.
It's just making.
We've done a little bit of outreach to the townships. Early on, I sent a note to the officers, township officers, asking the townships whether they were intended on delegating or not. I didn't get a lot of responses, but when we attended the meetings, there wasn't anybody standing up saying that they wanted to do that. I've also I've heard from one council member in the town of Dakota, and they would prefer to at least that member mentioned that they would prefer to delegate the registration. So the more cities that delegate, then there'll be a certain amount based on that denominator that will be issued. But that really is an option and a recommendation that you all get to make. So you can say it's 12,500, or you can propose a different number. But those are some of the things that are before you. And then, you have a draft of the zoning ordinance, and then we'll have a public hearing on that at our next meeting. So in between now and then, if you have questions on that, route them through the chairman, and we'll take them as they come in. And then and we'll get those back out to you before the next meeting.
Yeah, Gene.
What is the status of that one in Dresbach that we already gave a conditional use permit to? Knowing nothing.
There's nothing in the.
Yes.
They haven't done anything. It's,
What's your question?
What about that one we already gave a conditional?
That would have to be considered into the mix, but they had gone through a conditional use permit process already. So they have legal standing with that operation.
but nothing's happened to the building or the facility.
Well, I realize
Correct.
that, but
Yeah.
What's maybe uncertain is whether or not they obtain the required license, and they would have to successfully navigate the Office of Cannabis Management for their license. But the framework is already there for them.
that, there's one in Caledonia too, right? No, I realize that's not in Winona County.
Correct.
but
There's two. I think there's two. There's one at the old Dairy Queen.
Are they under the same
Close to the school.
requirements or?
They would be, but that would have to be set by Houston County, whether or not they'd allow more.
They're selling the lower potency stuff now,
Mhm.
the candy of
They
They are
all big stuff
in
yet.
Houston County, they are already selling?
Yeah, they're making it.
Not,
I understood.
not the high THC
the
stuff.
logos,
That will not be legal to be sold unless you're outside of the tribe. There's tribal locations in the state that are allowing, but not individual private entities at this point.
Well, I'm 1% Indian, so.
You can open your own outlet right up there on Pi 90.
That's for part of the profits. I'm hearing it.
Well, thank you, and it sounds like this is coming up uh,
So what do we need
next
to do
meeting.
tonight? Do we need to do
Well,
anything tonight? It's just,
no.
no, we don't have to say we're gonna.
Just agree to have a public hearing the next meeting.
And well, to get this done, you saw the deadlines. So we're really forced to have everything next 19th of December, if I remember that date is right. And that just gets it back to the county commissioners in time to maybe authorize it on their end on January 7th. Because it takes effect, January 1st of 2025.
And I would ask it, Emily from a public health, that what the documents she had be included to this group. Or is that?
So the documents that are going to be presented to the Community Health Board are actually related to a grant for cannabis education and prevention. So it's not necessarily related to.
For our zoning, Steve.
I just wanted to say the reason for trying to get it done so quickly is that even though the most likely or hopeful outcome is that the state will not give any preliminary approvals till they've done the rulemaking, there's a small chance that someone could go through that and get approved and then file, with us for a permit. And because there's money involved and there's probably big national companies, backing different things, you worry about somebody just trying to force their way through a lawsuit and suing, the county or the state or whatever. And if we have our rules in place before anything like that happens, it makes it much easier.
We don't want to be caught off guard on this.
Yeah.
So, thank you, Steve.
Mhm.
Doug?
Yeah, just one more point to what Steve was saying. So at that next meeting, in order to expedite this, if we got a recommendation too, and I'm not telling you how to do your work, you may need time, in which case this would cascade back into, future months. But if you were able to make a recommendation at that,
December 19th.
yeah, then that would allow us that expedited schedule. But again, I don't want you to do anything that you're,
Can't promise it, but we'll work for that.
but that's the most hopeful.
If we were to receive a permit in that kind of little window we have, would we be fine to table that while we're still working on our rulemaking?
That's just, so it's the thing that I and Steve and Maureen worry about and everybody else doesn't, but we worry about the worst case scenario. And so we just want to not be in that. We want to be in a good legal footing to be able to not accept that application. So that's work we're going to be doing now. It has something to do with the registration ordinance. We've been working on that a little bit too. And unfortunately, as I'm talking about this, Chelsea and our auditor treasurer, she's just coming off the election hangover. The election. And so she hasn't even had an opportunity. She knows it's coming, but she's not even had an opportunity to be part of this.
So do I understand correctly, we can't even form a skeleton right now as an interim to get us through February? Like, we couldn't say this is analogous enough to alcohol, let's pursue it on the same standards that we have alcohol off-sale sites? Is that anything that we can kind of roll into it? I just hate it if we had kind of in the situation like we had with kennels, where the earlier kind of get maybe the most premier rules applied to them, and then later they get more and more stricter rules as we get more and more informed, where it's a harder and harder hurdle for them to clear.
Yeah, what you're looking at in your packet for a draft zoning ordinance is really just largely based off of the model ordinance that the state provided for us. But admittedly, we're all, we've talked to a number of other counties. I think we've talked to at least 5 or 6 other counties, and we're all feeling around in the forest on this one.
I guess another question in terms of procedure, we have a certain amount of time to deny the application before it's outright just approved as proposed. Is that as I understand it?
30 days.
Well, we need an ordinance or die anyway.
We need to act on it in 30 days.
to deny it.
Yeah, otherwise.
It is approved as proposed. So if someone came in on January 5th or whatever, we should have something. They propose something, we table it for one discussion, meet a month later, it's already been approved. Do I understand that?
So,
Yes.
so I want to be on good footing to literally not accept an application until we're ready. So that would be the worst case scenario for me, would be that we would have to accept if somebody came in and insisted that we take their application.
We're regulating the land use. We're not regulating the permit of cannabis. We're saying you can only, this is, you know, setbacks, distances, locations and such. So it's kind of like, they got the permit to, you know, to sell, in my opinion, to sell, but we're only saying, oh, you can't sell it at that location. Maybe you need to move it 50 feet this way or that way. If we're just doing, again, are we getting dragged into something that's not county business? We don't have the expertise, we don't have the testing, we don't have it, but we're being dragged in by the state of Minnesota, but we are a land use function, not a cannabis use function. So again, I just think, yeah, we're being dragged into it.
Yeah, I mean, I think I think that the statute and the rulemaking is pretty clear what the state's role is and what our role is. It really is the zoning piece is what they're expecting us to do. Although, as I mentioned, the sheriff's got to do a certain amount and that kind of thing.
And then the public health is going to get money to educate. I mean, it just flowers out, of the responsibilities.
Well, thanks for the advance notice on that.
We'll figure it out.
Steve, did you have anything else you wanted to talk about?
No, I'm good. Thank you.
Okay. Any other comments before we adjourn?
Do we have to vote for a public hearing then next time around?
We didn't the last time you had a public hearing,
Proper public notice.
Public.
but they'll have to do a public notice.
Yeah.
And we'll have a public hearing on it
Okay, that's the,
on December 19th.
okay. I
Yeah.
just want to make sure so.
And we've got a tentative
Alright.
one. You heard the limitations, you know? It's like pass it and then we'll read it out.
Yeah,
Right.
heard that.
December of the year.
I move we adjourn.
Okay, I need a
Yeah,
second to
you
adjourn.
filled your-
All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Nay? Anybody not want to adjourn? We are adjourned at 9:00.